you very much. You seem to have had a fascinating life with so many adventures, and you've expressed creativity in some of those adventures. And I wonder if you would share how you've been creative in your mountaineering and work like that.
So, what are you doing? I'm not quite sure what you're all about. Your organization or your efforts or your conferences and that type of thing, right? I mean, I like the idea about creativity, which is important, but I kind of want to know a bit about yourself.
Okay, yes. Well, I have been researching for a PhD in the subject of creativity for the last 5 or 6 years now. And I've been exploring my own role in development of creativity skills because my background is as a business studies teacher. And so when I was teaching business, I was often disappointed at the lack of creativity that my students showed. So that's how my PhD research began, because I wanted to explore why it was that even teachers like myself who really value creativity, why is it that we were not enabling our students to develop these skills? And so that exploration has led me to this point where now I'm looking at recognition and persuasion in creativity. I'm wondering why some people get recognized for being very creative and others don't get recognized for their creativity. So that's my main focus. And I also enjoy looking at the ethics of creativity. Is creativity always ethical? Maybe creativity might be breaking the rules, expanding our comfort zones. All of that might be ecological for the individual, but is it ecological for society? Is it ecological for culture? So that's where I'm coming from. And I'm, coming from an education background and being an academic and at the same time being a freelancer, teaching business studies, I like the idea of creating a space where academics normally tend to speak with other academics, entrepreneurs talk to other entrepreneurs, and the educators talk amongst themselves. And I think that there's space for interaction between these different worlds, and it's when we start to explore across the boundaries of these different cultures of academia, the culture of education and the culture of entrepreneurship, when we expand those boundaries and create that space for conversations to take place interculturally, I see that there's scope for creativity there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a good endeavor, and PhD is always good too, because then people will listen to you. You must know something if you have a PhD. So anyway, it's good. I guess basically creativity is some of it can be sort of learnt, and some of it is inherent. And I guess if you look at people that are with high IQs, you would figure that they would be very creative. But in a lot of cases, they're not, because they don't necessarily have the desire or the circumstances that allow them to sort of extend themselves, to be able to get outside the norm or where they want to go. And I guess my particular case, when I look at my creativity, is there's also probably a bit of a genetic element in a sort of evolution of people. And I feel that in that particular vein, you're more like a hunter-gatherer or warrior, or what they call A personalities or something like that, that causes you to be a little more assertive in sort of getting outside your normal sort of domain. And the other aspect of that as well is that if you have a mentor, or you have someone or something that allows you to sort of extend your sort of natural environment into something else, and that could sort of preclude you to eventually sort of move into a little more problem solving or creativity. It's a form of survival as well. Do I keep on talking or?
No. Feel free to, let's just have a conversation around it. You said some very interesting things. First of all, the fact that highly intelligent people are not necessarily creative. The two don't always overlap entirely. And I found that in the research supports that view, that there isn't a correlation between creativity and intelligence as such, because sometimes highly creative people or highly intelligent people, a person who is highly intelligent, they often tend to be convergent thinkers. They know what the right solution is, the right answer to the problem, whereas the highly creative person will identify several answers, not necessarily the right answer, but numerous different possibilities for the answer. And what I found in my research is that teachers tend to like highly intelligent students compared with highly creative students, because the values tend to be very similar. The highly intelligent students will come up with the answer that the teacher is looking for, the convergent answer, whereas the creatives will tend to do their own thing and come up with not necessarily the answer that the teacher was looking for, but an entirely different possibility, which the teacher finds very difficult to mark, to assess. So they tend to be very unpopular. Does that kind of, does that ring any bells for you at all? Have you noticed that in your?
Well, I have, because, I basically used to work at a company called Xerox, and in a lot of cases, I would bring people on board with master's degrees and things like that. And you figure that somebody has a master's in business or those particular activities at that educational level, that they would be able to handle the situations in a company. And it really comes down to having someone come on board, and then basically you then kind of give them an assignment, and then you want them to go out and do the job. And in a lot of cases, you find out that after 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, you have to let them go because they're just not able to do the problem solving or get the results that you are expecting from someone at that level. And so it's a case of later on finding out that a lot of people, when they go through academia, they're going there in a lot of cases just to be able to pass the tests. And I spent a lot of time in China and with my software, and I thought that they wanted to learn English. But what I found, that they don't want to learn English. Most of them don't. All they want to do is show me how I can pass the test. So people are actually studying to pass a test as opposed to studying to really understand the variables into some type of situation. And even when your colleagues in business, I find that the ones that are really intelligent, yeah, they get the answer quickly, but they don't have the desire to go outside because they know the answer. And so there's a comfort level for them not to shake any sort of trees or go outside that sort of comfort zone to be able to look at other solutions as well. So they kind of finding that people with higher IQs versus people that are more maybe not as high IQ, they have to work harder, and that causes them to start to develop alternatives to some of the issues that they see, so they can make some decisions accordingly, as opposed to an academic decision, which is like a formula for mathematics, where you have right answer and wrong answer, and whereas in life there's many variables, and that's kind of the difference.
Absolutely. And also what I noticed is that people who are able to find the right answer, who tend to be conformists, who are able to identify what is required, they are the ones who get promoted. They are the ones who do really well in their careers because they know what is expected of them and they are able to produce it. Whereas the creatives, their values seem to be different. They're not as sensitive about the needs of the organization. So a lot of people will talk about thinking outside the box, whereas thinking outside the box, those kinds of ideas are not often useful. They're not often they're not going to bring financial rewards to the company, and so maybe in those cases the company needs to let that person go, because they might have very great ideas, but those ideas are not really relevant for that particular organization. So there's a lot of scope for thinking inside the box. And as we said earlier, those who can think inside the box are the convergent thinkers who know what is required in that particular context.
Well, you have, like they call them introverts, entrepreneurs. So you have inside the corporations, entrepreneurs. So those people are kind of being like an entrepreneur, but within an organization. And what you find is to be an entrepreneur within a corporation, it's not really it's encouraged, but only to a certain level. In my particular case, I found that a lot of people were upset because I would not follow the channels. I would not necessarily raise it to my boss, and who would raise it to their boss. I would just go directly to the president of the company and say, I don't think this is right, and so on and so forth. And so consequently, because in a lot of cases I had good solutions, they were reluctant to fire me for having good results. So there's a part of the sort of corporate structure that are kind of afraid because you are not following the channels, so they don't know what to expect from you. And so you're not conforming to that. And so creativity within a corporation is a lot of cases a fear factor for the people that are above you, because they think you're not respecting them. On the other hand, they're not necessarily going out of their way to promote you, like you're mentioning, if they come up with the right answer. And so there's a skill involved. There's sort of a social networking, social ability skill, that if they say the right things, it helps them to sort of fit into the mold and get promoted. And you see that a lot in big corporations and things like that, because they are predictable. They're not thinking really outside the box. They're just following the status quo and repackaging, I guess, the things that people want to hear. Versus an entrepreneur, someone that's creative within a company, they don't usually last very long in a company. In my case, I was there for 18 years at Xerox, and I was voted the most innovative manager in the company. But I realized that a lot of people who didn't like me or were afraid of me. But the other hand, my results were sort of unusual in a positive way. So they were sort of, they were in a quandary what to do with me. So, and I guess in some sense, when the Mount Everest thing came along, that's when I decided to, well, I've kind of gone as far as I could within Xerox. Now it's time for me to go out and do something for my daughter. And that's why I went and put together an expedition to climb Mount Everest, because I wanted to look for something that was big enough to attract global attention, so that the doctors and researchers could be educated on this Rett syndrome situation, RETT syndrome, genetic disorder that only affects girls. So consequently, I was looking for how can I find something outside of a charity, and there's a lot of charities around, but I needed something that's sort of big enough to attract celebrities and government funding and etc. And that's where I came up with the Mount Everest thing. And I came up with the Mount Everest thing because when I was traveling around the world, I was traveling with my ski boots, because I wanted to ski all the high mountains in the countries that I was going through, from Canada into Hawaii down to New Zealand and Australia and etc. and eventually ski Mount Everest and carry on. So And so I did that in 77. And then basically here it is basically now about 97, that type of stuff. So I'm looking at Everest, and then Everest came to mind because I was looking for something, and that's where I came up with the Climb for Hope in trying to make something that's sort of big enough. And the other thing is, when you're doing something, people get afraid to do that because it's sometimes too big. And in my case, I have to be afraid of doing too much because I know I can do it, but do I want to do it? You don't want to climb a mountain halfway and find out, oh, I don't want to do it now. So you climb down and do something else. So when you reach a certain level of creativity or problem solving, then you have to really be careful what you pick to sort of tackle and make it happen. So creativity to me comes from the fact of a need. In my case, it was a need for my daughter to try to find what caused the Rett syndrome and try to find a cure for that. And likewise, I guess publishing books or making a movie, all these things to me are more like a challenge because I've done it. What next, that type of things. And what I found when I did Mount Everest is that I spent like resigning from Xerox, putting a team together, training for it, raising the funding and all the rest of that. And then basically after spending like over 3 years to kind of get there, once you're at base camp, it's almost like, what do I do now? So because you put all your creativity and all your abilities to try to make you get from where you were from Canada, your vision, your dream, your mission, to actually now you finished, you're there, base camp. And then I realized you better have more than one dream in life. And so that's why I have a list of things now, right? So I've always added to that list, but the list become a little more demanding. And as you get more mature, you got to say, well, geez, am I going to go and tackle this, right? So I made a movie, a documentary that won the Gold Award at the New York Film Festival. But now on my list is actually make a Hollywood movie. What did it really take to actually stand at the base camp of Mount Everest? It's not about climbing Everest. It's about what did it take to actually, and who are the people that helped me, and like from Riza Gorbachev to Mila Maruni and all that stuff, helped me to actually get, to base camp of Everest. And then the obstacles you have, even from people with Rett syndrome. Like they didn't. I have a daughter with Rett syndrome, but the parents of other Rett syndrome girls, they didn't think I was a Rett parent because one, I was a male, and most of them are mothers, and two, what's Everest got to do with Rett syndrome? And so they couldn't connect the marketing aspect, the international aspect, the raising funds, and et cetera, et cetera. So then I had to fight with the American organization, not fight, but, I was really trying to show them the differences between just doing big sales and smaller things that they're more comfortable with, things that they can control, versus this faraway place in Mount Everest, and try and make that connection between Rett syndrome and international awareness and fundraising. And most of them didn't get it. They didn't understand why would I do that, right? But at the end, I did it, and then basically moved on to the next thing. So creativity basically is a growing factor based on your experiences to be able to feel comfortable and not be afraid to take the next step. Mm. Fear itself prevents people from being creative.
I totally agree with you. And I look at it as courage, that courage is an essential requirement, courage together with confidence. And obviously you had both of those, both courage and confidence, that took you to your adventures in Mount Everest. But what is it that made you persuasive of, the the people that supported you, what do you think it was about you, apart from your confidence perhaps? Was there anything else that persuaded them to support you?
Well, one thing was very important. Okay, when people tell you think outside the box, right? To me, that's crap. Okay, it's like look in the mirror, you're looking great, and people say you're looking great, and then you meet somebody and say, "Oh, you don't look too good. Did you not sleep?" And right away, all your enthusiasm, confidence just dissipates. Right? It's like somebody pricked your balloon. So to me, it's really important to take a look at who your foundations are. So if you're in Africa in a village trying to survive, and then you say, "Oh, look outside the box." They don't even know what you're talking about, right? And their whole thing is, am I going to have something to eat today? I haven't eaten for 2 days, or whatever the case is, or where I'm going to get some. So it's a wholly different scenario. So you have to have a certain comfort level, and I guess a platform to be able to even think of being in a box, because you're really in a tunnel or something like that as you survive. So in my case, it's my mother that provided the foundation and the confidence to kind of let me do the crazy things I did in my life. And maybe initially I didn't realize that, but I certainly realized later on when you look at how come I was able to do that, because she was kind of always telling me, go and do something, that type of situation. And to the point where it wasn't sort of confidence, it's just silliness. It's a youthfulness. In some cases, just go and do something and then realize you make mistakes, you get in trouble and all kinds of stuff, right? Now, if your foundation, if your sort of box that you're living in at that time has a lot of sort of support and resources, then you can do other things. But sometimes if they have resources, that prevents you from doing other things because you don't, why? You got the car, you got this, you got that. So it doesn't allow you to sort of grow your sort of creativity and your need to sort of excel and do something differently, right? So you're just comfortable in the environment that you're at. So if your parents were doctors or engineers or teachers, then you have probably a roadmap of sort of thinking and behaving and sort of following those type of footsteps. If you are totally barren and there's no sort of guidelines like that outside of just the support of someone or a mentor of someone that allows you to extend yourself outside of that box, then you're able to sort of start pushing that envelope. Or more importantly, not going outside the box, but you're just opening the window. So instead of having a little peephole, like you go in the door and you look to see who's at that door, you have a small window, and then the windows start to get bigger and bigger, and then your horizons start to become bigger and bigger because you have more light coming into the activity and the darkness that you're living within that sort of framework. So in my particular case, it was that need for extending myself to not be bored, to go out and do things. And that's kind of propelled me to want to travel around the world. You read books that people said, if you make a list of things to do, basically, and you should write those down. And I found that writing them down is sort of internalizing, externalizing, and back to feedback internalizing. People have a lot of dreams, and the easiest thing for them to do is dream about it and not write it down. So it's easy for them to write it down, their dream list or the things they want to do or bucket list, whatever they're calling it now. But most people don't do that. They in essence have their ideas in their brain, but they don't actually write it down like a things to do list. And so I teach my people, okay, to actually write it down, okay, and then basically look at that list and work on that list and prioritize that list. So that's how it helps people to actually move from a small window to a bigger window, because your list gets bigger, so then you see more things. or you want to see more things, or you want to be involved with more things.
I suppose the written word has power in itself, doesn't it? Like, it's almost like it's set in stone, it's written down, so that the power of that written word generates, it creates, you know.
Well,
so
it's a feedback loop, okay, for you, because your persona is made up of your sort of experiences, memories within your brain. So what you do is you're actually going into your long-term memory, into the visualization aspect of it, and you see it. Now you take it and you write it down, and exactly what you said. Now you graphically see it in Word, or you can draw it, which is even better. But just by writing it down, looking at it, now you're getting the sort of the feedback into your long-term memory. And then they talk about, putting visuals and stuff like that on a fridge door and so on and so forth. That helps in some cases, but in most cases it doesn't. Okay. But what I found is that if you make that list and you have that sort of desire, you'll gravitate towards what I call your innermost heart's desire. So when you climb a mountain, there are many ways to climb a mountain, right? So if you look at trying to climb Mount Everest, well, thousands of ways of climbing Mount Everest. And so it's not a sort of straight line, because there's no elevator or anything like that goes up there, or escalator. So you basically zigzagging your way up, overcoming any obstacles that you may have, weather conditions that may sort of arise, and you're dealing with them as you move still toward your goal. The nice thing about Everest is you can see the top. You know exactly where it is. And then you got to figure out how you're going to get from base camp to Everest, to the top. But when you have a goal, you don't really see that. You have a goal, a vision. It's like looking at something that keeps on moving on you. So the more concrete you can make that, the easier it is for you to visualize it and gravitate towards that, right? And you may not exactly get to that particular peak or that area, but at least you'll get close to it or someplace around it, that type of stuff, because things sometimes shift you off course. So creativity is the ability to sort of look outside yourself and then sort of create a visual, goals, mark them down, and start moving towards it. Now, the moving towards it means passion. Passion is energy, so you can have passion and eat a whole cake or just a piece of cake. Okay, but it's there, and you tell myself, no, I only have one slice. Okay, maybe two, whatever. But that's where the discipline and the passion come together, and depending what you're trying to do, right? So in my case, I have a goal of traveling to 118 countries. I'm at 96. So I'm out in the porch, and I said, well, do I want to get out there and do another country, right? Okay. So I go and do another country. So if you didn't have that, if you don't have those things, you won't necessarily move from where you are on the couch or in a chair or, some environment that you're just comfortable with. And why would you bother getting up? Okay. Or you might go on a cruise or something like that, but you'll go on the same cruise all the time because it's comfortable, as opposed to let's try something different. So people don't like to try something different because it causes anxiety and it causes stress. And then they look at what's going on in the world and say, oh, there's too much problems in the world. I'm not going to go anywhere. So, but if you're creative, you say, no, you'll be able to go.
There's so many travelers who will do these countries, and everywhere they go, they expect to find McDonald's, they expect to find Starbucks, they expect to find all the comforts that they had at home. And sometimes you wonder why they bother to travel thousands of miles across the world to look for exactly what they had, on their own street corners, basically. So when you travel, do you allow that experience to be creative, or do you plan it very, very carefully? How do you ensure that experience actually changes you in some way?
Well, I just came back from Africa, right? I just came back October. So, and I got an invitation to do a keynote in Nairobi, Kenya, on my AI gamification. And initially, my initial thought, Africa, I don't want to go to Nairobi. Then I said, Africa. Okay. So if I'm going to go there, then when I'm there, I'm going to go and do another 16 countries so that I can get to 100 countries, right? And so what did I wanted on my sort of things to do list? I had Victoria Falls and I had Cape Town. So what did I do? I went to Nairobi, did my keynote, and then basically from there I just said, okay, so Kilimanjaro. So just took a plane to Kilimanjaro, and then from and there was a school there, a girls' school. So I donated my software and stuff like that to the girls' school. And then from there, I said, okay, so then I went to Uganda and Rwanda, and then I couldn't get into Burundi because they said I need a visa, whatever, right? So I went back to Nairobi, and then from there I went to Zambia and Victoria Falls. So I'm, was there for a few days, a few nights and stuff like that. And then from Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, and then from back to Zambia, and then Botswana, and so and from there there's 4 countries. So I saw Victoria Falls, and you get a little piece of the old British Empire there, that type of stuff, and stayed at the Victoria Hotel in Zimbabwe, and so then from there down at Cape Town. So I've just had a backpack, and I Airbnb. I said, okay, I'll do Airbnb. But then I realized that's not really conducive because, 1, they don't have Wi-Fi. And 2, you find out they're much further away from the airport. And I'm not there to spend like 2 weeks or something like that. My goal is to knock off a few countries. So then I figured, well, it's probably better just for me to get a hotel or something close to the airport, as opposed to taking Uber to an Airbnb and find out that I'm isolated in some of the Airbnbs. I said, oh, Jesus, it's like a jail here. So I said, nah, and so I just changed the format of where I was going to stay, right? And so I'm basically backpacking and just going on next, and not really planning that much as much as a lot of people do. Like I have a friend that just came back from a cruise in Norway, the Baltics. He spent like a year planning for it. He planned it for over a year ago, research, plan. I don't do that. I'm basically looking at going to Iceland and London and Paris and blah, 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 and doing another 20 countries. And when I get there, I'll just plan where I'm going to go next. But I can do that. I'm comfortable with that. I like that. And talking to people and finding what's the best places to go and places to see and that type of thing. Usually what happens is if you travel, you want to go and see like in the Taj Mahal. So I said, okay, the Taj Mahal's on my list. So I said, okay, so from Nepal, I go down to Varanasi and Taj Mahal and Khajuraho and all those places. And then I want to go up to Srinagar and that type of stuff. So I just plan as I go along. You meet people going the other way and they're saying, oh, go here, go there. Oh, yeah, okay. So that's how I do it, right? But I think I'm not normal in that sense. A lot of people that do travel, backpacking and stuff like that, they're more into the adventure part of it.
Mm. And how does your traveling transform your life?
Well, I think at this stage, it gives me a good flavor, a good understanding in parts of the world, the cultures that are around there. When people, especially when there's a lot of usually disaster and war and things like that, whether it's in Nepal or Bhutan or all these places I've been there. I can relate to it. I can identify it. I understand a bit about the people that are there and the cultures and some of the things that are going on, like in Afghanistan. I spent, a lot of time in Afghanistan and going around Afghanistan because when I was traveling around the world, I lost my ski boots in Kabul. Somebody stole them. But But anyway, so it's just that whole awareness, and also because I like history. I'm a bit of a history buff, so I kind of equate what 1,000 years or 500 years ago how life was. If you look at 1,000,000 years ago, how many people were there on Earth? They say there were about 18,000 to 2,000 people on Earth. I don't, from DNA extrapolation and stuff like that. Whether it's real or not, I find that incredible, because I figured, 18,000 people, in 2050, you're going to have 10 billion people. So if you're looking at 18,000 people, how do they get from 18,000 to where we are at 7 billion? And all the things that are in between. So that's sort of the marvel that I find, is looking at the civilization, the growth, and all these things that happen to that. So it makes me much, much more receptive and sensitive to other people, other cultures. And everybody's human. They got their issues, they got their problems, they got their hopes and dreams. So, you just get along with everybody. That's why it's sad to see so much strife going on. A lot of that strife is because of ideology and theology. That sort of separates humanity from each other because of these very sort of gates people put up, organizations or sort of religions put up against other people.
Okay. All right. Brilliant. Well, Erwin, thank you. That's been a fascinating tour of experiences that you've had all around the world, and how you've experienced and expressed creativity through those adventures. And I will look forward to speaking with you further about some of these adventures in a different conversation, but I think I've taken a lot of your time for now.
Okay. All right. Glad we connected.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Ciao, ciao.